Hey guys, Brian here with Better Chess Training, and we are going to be doing episode 2 in How to Think in Chess for Beginners. And the goal here is to share a logical way of thinking uh, as we play. And I'm playing against the chess.com bots. Today I'm going to be playing against one of the beginner bots or easier bots rated 1000. This is Emir. And again, it is a computer AI, and I'm going to try to play logically. I don't always play the best moves, but hopefully the moves I do play make sense, and I'll explain the reasoning behind every move. Okay, so here we go. And last time in episode 1, I played the white pieces. So in today's episode, I'm going to be playing the black pieces. Okay, my opponent plays e4. And here, I usually play e5 here, and it helps to control the center. But I'm going to play something a little different today just to change things up. And I'm going to play e6. And this leads to an opening called the French defense. And I follow up here with d5. And the idea here is to attack white's center using my pawns instead of I guess, blocking with e5. Okay, as we discussed in the last episode, opening principles are mainly try to control the center and developing our pieces as well as getting our king to safety. So here I'm going to continue by developing a piece. I know some of the theory here, but even without knowing it, it's very important to try to play logically. Okay, here, my knight's being attacked, so I should probably move it. And if I moved it here, for example, then white can take it, and after I take back, we'll probably be able to take my pawn at some point, and I'll end up losing a pawn. Of course, it doesn't make a lot of sense to move it back. That would be sort of undeveloping a piece. So instead, I'm going to move it here. And the idea here is to eventually use the knight here to reinforce attacking the center with my c-pawn. Okay, so I'm going to play my knight back here. Okay, and white logically, incorrectly, reinforces his center. So you can see white has a nice broad center here. And if we let white just build up, white's going to run us over. So we want to attack the center with c5. Now the timing of taking here depends on a lot of things. You have to look at every single situation and try to determine when it's right to capture. Okay, I'm going to continue by developing another piece with knight to c6, putting more pressure on this d4 square. Okay, white plays a4, and here I'm not quite sure why. By playing a4, white could be threatening to continue to push and take more space. Could also be using this as an anchor maybe to put a piece on b5, like either the knight or the bishop. Now, there's a couple things I can do here. I always want to consider this capture. Doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Here, might not be so good because he's just going to take back with a piece, and I didn't really gain anything from that. Better would be if white were to take here, and then I could develop my piece at the same time. Of course, white's going to keep that tension probably. Now, considering this pawn here, I probably don't want to let it advance to a5 because now I can't, say, move my queen out here to a5 if I wanted to do that at some point, because now the rook would be covering that square. So a common way to defend this would be with a5. Now, this does weaken the b5 square, meaning that I no longer have a pawn that can attack that. So I have to consider that as well. I think what I'm going to do here is consider how I'm going to develop my pieces. At some point, I'm going to want to develop my bishop and my queen maybe to this diagonal, which means eventually capturing here. So if he does play a5, this would prevent me from playing queen to b6. The question is, should I play queen to b6 now or wait? Now, if I play queen to b6 now, we have to consider what white can do. White can actually push the pawn, but I could take it with the knight, which would seemingly win a pawn. My only thought there is, does white have anything with, playing something like knight to a4 at some point and attacking my queen? I don't think so, because I can just retreat my queen at that point and still have time to and just retreat it to say c7, where the knight would still be protected. But I could just play a5 here and then play queen to b6 later. So I think I'm in between those two moves. I'm going to go ahead and play a5, prevent this pawn from advancing, and then play a6. Okay, well now we see why this was played, and it's so that white can develop his rook. Now, normally I wouldn't recommend developing the rooks. In the last episode, I talked about developing the minor pieces first. Those are the bishops and the knights. And here's why. There's actually a tactic that I see, and I'm going to give you a moment to look for it before I talk about it. And so you can pause it if you want, but I'll stop for a couple seconds. And here we have a tactic, I think, where we can win some material. I think I can take this pawn now on d4, and my bishop, this is called a discovered attack, my bishop will now be attacking this rook. At the same time, my pawn will be attacking this knight. So two things are attacked at the same time. Now he can save one of them, but he can't save both. So for example, he could play something like knight to b5, for example. And then after I captured a rook, white has a choice of either capturing with the pawn or with the knight. Or he can move his rook over, say to b3 or back, and then I would take the knight. So I think either way, I should gain an advantage. The only thing that I'm a little bit leery of here is that now he can't play something like, here, let me explain. I can play c takes d4, and then he can play his knight here. After I take, he can actually take with the pawn, and then on his next move, put his knight here with check. And then I wouldn't be able to do something. Well, what I could do is castle, and then he wouldn't be checking my king. But this knight would have a very nice, what they call an outpost, here on d6. However, I'll be up in material, and white's structure will be a little damaged. So I think this is going to be a good trade for me. I hope you can follow all of that. I know we've... I talked about a few moves ahead. Okay, so white does play this knight to b5, and I think it makes sense for me. Well, let me consider now. I just want to make sure I'm not doing anything incorrect. I think it makes sense for me to capture here on a3 and then castle. At that point, my opponent can then try to, he could put his knight here. And this knight will be in a good position. But I think with the material advantage, I'll eventually be able to unwind and maybe use one of my knights to attack him. So let's go ahead and try this. I might be incorrect, but I might... Okay, so just as I'm considering here, he takes with the pawn. And I think it would be good for me to castle here. Otherwise, he's going to get this with check. He's going to get this check in, and then I won't be able to castle. Okay, so let's see here. I'm going to castle, and now I'm expecting knight to d6. Okay, he's going to take here first, and here I'm not going to capture. Well, That's one choice, is to capture him. Another one would be to try to develop a little bit and prepare for this knight to d6 move. Um, and one way to do that would be to develop my own knight here and then try to get it here to e4. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And by doing this, I'm also attacking this pawn here. Okay. My opponent plays h4. Okay, so now in this case, we know that this bot is a little weaker. But when you're playing, it's important not to underestimate your opponent's moves and plans. So you do want to always try to think, what is my opponent trying to do? And in this case, I do think my opponent is just trying to do some type of kingside attack. Here, my opponent, I could take this pawn here, but I think that would be a little waste of time, because time is a factor too, besides material. Instead, I'm actually going to bring my knight here, I think, where it's going to prevent him from playing this successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and play my knight here. Okay, now he brings his queen over. And with this queen over here, he's actually maybe considering a move like this. Doesn't quite work yet because this pawn would be unprotected, or what we call hanging. Okay, now, actually, because he kind of took away one defender from this knight, I might be able to, I might want to consider trying to attack it. For example, maybe queen to b6, and then I would have two attackers. Maybe forcing this trade. Just want to make sure here that nothing is going to surprise me. Now, yeah, I think this would be good because it kind of forces the issue. If I could take first, and then if he takes back with the knight, then play queen to b6. But then I think he could just bring his knight back over here. So I think I'm going to go ahead and play queen to b6 here. Okay, my opponent plays queen to e2. And this is a mistake because now I think I can just win his knight because I have two attackers and he only has one defender. Well, that's not... the one thing I have to worry about is that he might play something like this, bishop to e3. If I take, he plays bishop to e3, and then he's pinning my knight. However, my knight can escape and actually escape with check. So that is safe. But you have to watch out for those types of tactics. Okay, knight takes d4. I'm actually attacking. So here, I'm just going... It looks like I'm just going to win a piece. The one thing I have to watch out for is to make sure my queen can't get trapped. And I'm perfectly fine here because after queen takes d4, if he were to play something like queen to e3 or bishop to e3, I can just play a check or I can just capture his pawn. So here, I won a piece. So I'm way ahead on material, and this is the part of the game where you want to consider, you want to kind of take a moment and consider how you're actually going to go from a winning game to actually winning the game, if that makes sense. And a lot of times, first you have to make sure that your opponent doesn't have any huge threats against you. And in this case, white maybe could try to push one of these pawns, but I'm pretty well protected. No direct attacks against my king, but we always want to check. Now, after you've looked against any potential threats, then you want to look at how are you going to improve your pieces. So if you look at this position, we're ahead by a lot of material, but we have a few pieces that haven't been developed, like this bishop and this rook. I could just say this rook as well, but it has moved and it is serving a role here in protecting the king. So what I'm thinking I want to do next is actually develop my other pieces. So the first one is to move this bishop out of the way. Now again, I could take some time and just grab a pawn, but here you're ahead enough material. Adding more material to your advantage isn't going to necessarily speed up your win as much as developing your pieces. So my idea here is to actually play b6, and then after, now if he plays bishop to e3 here, that's fine. I could actually go ahead and actually play a check here like this, which would be quite annoying as well. And then develop my bishop. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Now, white improves the position of his bishop and kind of puts it on this outpost. But this was part of my plan. I didn't mention it, but I actually could pin this bishop and trade it. So here, I'm threatening to take it. And actually, this is an interesting position because the bishop is actually pinned. So this pawn is actually not protected. So I can go ahead and capture it, which is what I'm going to do. Okay, now he's unpinning. So, but I have another, actually there's a couple tactics here. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. And there's actually a few tactics here, but one of them is probably the better one to play. Take a moment and see what you can come up with. Okay, this particular position, you actually have a potential knight fork with this knight coming here and attacking the king and queen. However, your bishop, or the white bishop, is attacking your queen. So it might be better to use a different tactic, which is to take the bishop on b5, and now you'd be pinning the queen to the king. So that's another tactic called a pin, which I think we've discussed in the last episode as well. Okay, we're going to win more material here, and we're going to win this queen. So this bot is not as strong as the bot we played last time, but a lot of your opponents are also not going to be, are going to also be beginning players. So I thought it would be good to demonstrate how to play against another beginner. Okay, here, again, we have a lot of choices, no direct threats. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take this pawn. I talked earlier about not necessarily taking more material, but in this case, it comes with a threat. And that threat is to, of course, take this bishop. So I'm going to go ahead and play here. Okay. And here we are very close to finishing the game off, but we want to make sure that we're taking care of all of the small things. So what I'm actually going to do here, let me take a look here. We have opportunities to check our opponent's king, but it really doesn't matter at this point, or it doesn't do anything right yet because our king can just move, and it's not going to win the game. However, we do have a move that could be annoying, which is to actually bring our bishop back here and attack his rook. His rook, this square is not safe, nor is this one, so his rook would have to retreat along this file, which would take away some squares from the opposing king and maybe give us some more opportunities. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, he brings his king here. And now here again, it's not quite time to, well, let's see here. We're getting very close to some opportunities here. I can continue with something like knight to g3. Again, threatening the rook, and the only safe square for the rook would be here, and then that would, I could force a check here. Again, I'm not sure if it quite wins yet. I don't think it does, but it would be pretty painful probably. However, you know what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to, let's see here. Well, actually, what I'm going to do is just advance my pawn. I do have a pawn that's being attacked, and I'm just going to go ahead and advance it and create another passed pawn here. Okay, my opponent brings his king over. Now this rook can come out, and what you might notice is that actually he could play something like rook to c1. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually bring my rook here, and that way trade down all of his pieces. Okay, he plays rook to c1 here. I just have to make sure I'm not stalemating him, meaning, you ought to make sure, if you're not checkmating your opponent, that he has a move to make so that you don't accidentally draw when you have a big advantage. So here, I'm going to take the rook. And from a standpoint of a trade, white gets a little bit, has a little bit of a better trade there. But I basically got rid of all of his pieces, and now it will be very easy for me to win. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push this pawn. What I'm doing is I'm creating a passed pawn that I can promote. I'm going to ignore this pawn because it can't really do anything to me. And here I'm just going to take this pawn. Okay, again, I can ignore it, but I'm just going to take a move and take the pawn. And again, I have to make sure I'm not stalemating my opponent here. For example, here, if I do take this pawn, then I would be stalemating my opponent. So what I need to do is give my opponent some squares to move. So I'm actually going to move my bishop. I'm actually going, let's see here. Yeah, I'm going to move my bishop away. This is a little awkward here. Okay, he's going to check me here, but again, now he's got this square to go. And I'm actually going to, again, give some material back because I'm totally winning. And I'm going to take here with the knight. And again, the key is to make sure that I'm not going to stalemate my opponent. Okay, he moves here. And here, I'm not going to promote. Instead, I'm going to checkmate him with my rooks, I think. So I'm going to go, let's see, let's move this rook onto the open file. Again, I have to make sure he's got a square to move. And here, I can actually checkmate him. Again, if you don't see it right away, pause the video, see if you can find the checkmate. And here, you see this rook is protecting this file. So rook to h1 is checkmate. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Leave any questions you might have in the comments. I do think there are probably a few moves that I didn't play the best move, but I think overall I played pretty well and hopefully explain things clearly so that you guys can use these ideas in your games. Anyways, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and I'll see you next time.